Was it that military background yourself and the military background of Edward Snowden? Was there some intersection?
No, but I noticed.
You interested
also,
in?
Ron Kovic in his story, Ron, Born on the 4th of July.
For your Vietnam
the same
films.
Kind of transition happens. Ron, played by Tom Cruise, amazing performance, does a transition from a conservative small town Long Island boy to a ferociously anti-war Vietnam protester who went to the Democratic Convention and then Republican Convention and really spoke up to Richard Nixon himself, screaming and yelling, and was dragged out of the convention hall. Wrote a beautiful book about it. Wonderful, great anti-war story, one of the best. But that too is about that transition. Mr. Snowden's a different story because he was not, he tried out for the military and was rejected. Essentially, he broke his legs, his tibia, and became a top, he went to the CIA, trained, and he was working his way up the ladder as a top cyber war specialist.
And in the film, he starts out as a GOP. I mean, him and his girlfriend have very different political views from the outset.
Yeah, and she's a part of the reason why he changes. She's the only human connection he has in the film, basically. And that's played by, you were talking about Lindsay Mills, his 9-year girlfriend, played by Shailene Woodley. A great energy in her. She plays a role in keeping him human, and that's really important when you work at the NSA for like 9 years and you know that you're losing your mind because you keep doing more and more illegal things and you don't really realize it. In other words, you become what the Nazis were accused of at the Nuremberg trials, just accessory to crime.
What was your reaction personally when, because it comes out later in the film when the president of Bolivia's plane is held down in Austria.
Yeah.
You know him, you've interviewed him for a previous documentary.
Yes.
What did you feel like when you watched it on the news that his plane was being brought down in the hunt for Snowden?
It was pretty definite evidence of the United States' control of the world. The old European nations that I knew as a young man, they were no longer independent. I mean, everybody was scared of the U.S. We have to do what they say. And the fact that they pulled the president's plane down over Austria, it was, just tells you that the U.S. really controls the world, as much as, not all the world, but much of it, and airspace too, and underwater, and cyberspace, space, you know, it's total dominion, total domination.
It obviously doesn't control.
Iran, China, Russia come to mind as people that have tried to maintain an independent course. And I think essentially because they have nuclear weapons, Russia was able to give him asylum. Not that they were seeking that. They were surprised when he showed up. He came on his way to South America where he had asylum promised and safe journey. But the Americans froze his passport in the air, and he was marooned in Russia, and they granted him asylum. Russia had been, I don't know if you know this, had been negotiating an extradition treaty with the United States prior to that for a long time, trying to get back its criminals that had stolen money from Russia. And they were unable, the United States would never sign an extradition treaty with Russia on that basis. Then they wanted Snowden back, and the Russians said, you know, we can't break our laws.
So you went to Moscow, I understand, as part of the
I met him for
research
the first
film?
time in January 2014. I was a little more anxious then. The U.S. was hostile to his, in the polling, he was the opposite of Europe. Snowden was unpopular. He was viewed by many Americans as a guy who gave away secrets. There wasn't much distinction being made about what he'd given away and much attention to it. And I do believe that plays a factor in this whole reception, is that people don't understand what he did still. Plenty of news, documentary, but to understand what was involved in what he did, the data mining that we're doing as a country, it was missed by the general public. They think it's about their iPhone only or their computer. They think that way. It's a small part of the equation. One of the things, most important things that Snowden was saying was that, look, I understand terrorism is a frightening thing, but let's targeted surveillance works. That means paying attention. You look like a terrorist. You know your cousin's a terrorist. You know, I keep a file on you. I watch you with signals, and I watch you with human intelligence. I get information. You hang out with people. All these people have families, friends, people who talk to them, and you target the surveillance. You target it at you. I don't think you're going to evade. It's not passive surveillance. You're really being watched. So I think we're going to get you. You're not going to get away with the things you did. And all these terrorist actions since 9/11, we always come up with a background, and we know that he's been watched by one intelligence agency or another. But they've never been able to connect the dots and put them together because they don't cooperate, partly because they have such an overwhelming task to watch everybody. And I think that is a huge difference. So why are we doing mass surveillance? No one really answers it. They tell us it's on the off chance that they'll pick up the occasional terrorist who's on a telephone who's stupid enough to be caught in the general population. That doesn't happen, very rarely. They're too smart. So the reason we're doing it, and Snowden proposes this in the movie, is basically to have control of as much information as possible, economic, social, military, corporate information, financial information. That leads to all the difficulties you can bring into a country by making that public. You can make a bank scandal. Brazil comes to mind. There was regime change in Brazil. Dilma was gotten rid of. You know that she was surveyed heavily by the U.S. Petrobras is the oil company there. And then there's a Venezuelan oil company. You go to Ukraine. You can point to all the information that suddenly pops up, changes that leads to the change in Ukraine. And you got to look at Syria, all the information that starts to leak out.
Well, you have been attacked personally, particularly, I suppose, ever since the JFK film. But that hasn't stopped you continually wanting to reevaluate American history.
I'm more interested in the truth than being...
Yeah, but Edward Snowden, interestingly, has stopped releasing documents, and he has loads of them. Do you think he really seriously wants a pardon?
Wait a second. Edward Snowden has, you say, has stopped releasing documents. He gave the documents to the journalists in Hong Kong, and he said so, and he said, I don't longer have them. It's up to you. You are responsible for the release of these documents. I'd like you to be responsible, and he gives his reasons, and he doesn't want his colleagues or anybody hurt in this thing. He wants them to practice judicial.
Who has the right?
Present it to the people in the public interest and let the people decide. They did some of it. They still have a lot of stuff they are going to release. I mean, apparently it takes time. It's a very complex material. Maybe they will never release more. I don't know. There's stuff in Germany. There's stuff in Brazil. And the New York Times has it, given by The Guardian. The Guardian owns it. And there's a Washington Post, but that was Barton Gellman's, has some or all. What they do with it is up to them. There's a lot of information there. WikiLeaks has certainly stepped up into the breach in the lack of information. I mean, they've provided a lot of information. So, look, Snowden was out of the case in 2013. He wanted the emphasis to be, the spotlight to be on the message, not the messenger. He was wrong because the world was more interested in kill the messenger, kill the message. I think that the U.S. went heavily after Snowden and called him a traitor and profiled him as a spy or as a low-level NSA guy. It's not true. His lawyer at the ACLU, lawyers have made it clear that he wants to come back. He'd face a trial if it were a fair trial, and he could present his case. And he'd take time, too. I mean, he's not trying to evade it. He'd like to come home. He loves America. He would like a spirit of reform or targeted surveillance to predominate. He would like to change to the internet to be what it can be. But it's been used for these malicious circumstances. Data mining, which is what we're doing on an extensive level, is used for drone warfare. I mean, this is where it leads to, and also for cyber warfare. Cyber warfare is the most dangerous and insidious and is upon us now. Country after country can use it now that the United States initiated it in 2007 against Iran with Israel. They attacked Iran. It's unofficial. It's still a classified operation. But they're very happy. Michael Hayden was happy to boast about it without giving it away. But the point is that we started it, and ever since then, people have understood it and are using it. Other countries have developed forms of it, and independent hackers have come out of nowhere. And also, are there many geniuses in the world? You know, who knows? So in other words, we have a situation, as Snowden calls, a surveillance free-for-all, where we don't know who's doing what.
How bad do you think it is getting in Britain? Because I mean, it's ironic in your new film, Edward Snowden. Snowden got away thanks to Julian Assange, but Julian Assange is very much trapped here in London, according to the UN, under arbitrary detention.
Yeah. No, Assange helped at the end there to get him out of Hong Kong. And Sarah Harrison stayed with him for 40 days or something like that until he got asylum. She really devoted to this case. WikiLeaks has done an incredible job, and hopefully, you know, this thing will be solved, but it's an insane situation to be.
And the Obama legacy, if one watches this film in 20 years, this film be...
In 20 years, this film will be memory, or will be hopefully an active remnant of a time that we best forget.
Doesn't it destroy his presidency to an extent?
No, it doesn't destroy it.
When it comes to
totalitarianism. It brings him into the question. His support of the surveillance state after he ran on the opposite kind of program for president and promising transparency. He's been the hardest on journalists ever. Journalists need a permission. I mean, the government employees need permission from their superiors now to talk to any journalists. Permission. All the leaks that come from Washington are definitely pro-American leaks, like the Panama Papers. They put out by the administration. So it's a highly biased time, but it's a bad time. It reminds me of the 1950s. And I think we're heading, hopefully not, to another Berlin Cuba crisis, which was so close. We documented that in Untold History of the United States, 1963.
The 12-part series of documentaries.
The near accidents that can happen any day in Syria now, Russian and American jets close by each other. It's very dangerous. And cyber warfare compounds the problem because we never know who. It takes time, I repeat, time to find out who gave, where it's coming from. And that people don't seem to know the patience for that in a news cycle. It requires quick answers.
Oliver Stone, thank you.